Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we are currently working on our Duna lander, and I've made a couple of alterations here. I've added a reaction wheel here. I've changed our air sniffer to be radially attached rather than the nose cone, because that really didn't work. We should consider putting some form of nose cone on here, but we don't have a larger nose cone. So we might just have to have that not be an aerodynamic surface and just have this one be an aerodynamic surface. Now, I kind of want this to be a docking setup over here. I know that's kind of strange, but I do kind of want that. And if that's the case, then we should probably have some sort of RCS on this. Do we have RCS at this point? Yeah, we've got some monoprop tanks. We've got the R25, which would in theory fit... Ooh, that's not where I want that. Which would, in theory, fit up top here. This thing is probably pretty top-heavy. Alternatively, we could put monoprop tanks on each of these, which is intriguing. I feel like that's a better place to put it. Then we would need our monoprop thrusters, right? And I would definitely like to put monoprop thrusters... not there, but something like up here or so. 8 is probably overkill. Let's bring it to about 4 or so, and we'll put 4 here, and then like 4 here. Maybe not quite there, maybe like here. Something like that. Okay, now the monoprop may or may not flow. I also wanted to check these fuel lines here and see if there's a mode for them. Apparently not. Okay, so the way the fuel lines work in KSP2 is really strange, but whatever. I guess that's reasonably fine for right now. So, this is about landing on Duna and in theory returning home, right? Now, it's not necessarily going to get us all the way there, and that's understood. I'm going to put in a decoupler down... Actually, I'm thinking about how we want to do this. The engine is here. But what if it wasn't? What if instead of using this engine, we used 5 Poodle engines? I know that's really weird, right? So it would end up being something like this. I am wondering what that thrust to weight would be over Duna. 3.17 in the atmosphere, 3.15. That is acceptable. So then the question is, well, what's the point of doing that? Well, I'm thinking about how we want to attach our next stage. And the idea behind that, well, it's not perfect. The idea behind that, though, would be that this stage is not actually utilized in the descent. And if that's the case, then honestly, this fuel line might not be necessary. It probably isn't necessary, in fact. So what we would do here is we would split off the engine here. That is this engine. That would go up into stage 2. And that's fine for now. We're going to work on those stages for sure. But what I'm thinking at this moment is we put a TD-25 here, like that. Then we put a docking port here, and then a second docking port like that. That's already pre-docked together. Then that connects to our interplanetary transfer stage, which we undock from, land on Duna, and then take off from Duna and re-dock to and use as part of our return trip. And then this fuel here would all be conserved, in theory. My next question is, how much delta V is this? 2702? Noted. 2.53 thrust to weight should be plenty, and we'll be able to rely somewhat on our parachutes in the thin Duna atmosphere, but we'll definitely need to do some amount of burning to land. So that's the overall concept behind the lander here. Next, we're going to need to do our interplanetary transfer stage, and to that end, right, we gotta go... I always forget how this is done, but there we go. Something like that. I want to go up a bit. So, we're going to need our interplanetary transfer stage, and this is going to need to be a pretty hefty stage. An X264 with another Poodle engine might not be the worst thing in the world, but what if we didn't carry the Poodle engine, and what if instead of doing that, we used this fuel in these engines? That's an interesting thought. We certainly could think about doing something like that. But this is not going to be a huge amount of fuel here. So, as a hypothetical, if we put a Poodle here, that Poodle is in stage... What stage is this? Stage 4? No. Stage 1. Right, that would make sense. So, this stage here, this is Kerbal vacuum. This is 783 meters per second. So that is not a lot of delta V there for an interplanetary transfer stage. What I want this to do is I want this to take us from Kerbal orbit, hopefully a relatively high Kerbal orbit, put us into interplanetary, so exit Kerbal, and then at that point, I want it to take us to Duna, and enter into a decent orbit around Duna, and maybe do an inclination change as well. That's quite a lot of things, right? So we definitely need more delta V than 783. I can tell you that right now. That is absolutely going to be necessary. So to that end, we might want to have strap-on tanks on this as well. This is starting to get absurd, but that is a potential option. This interplanetary transfer stage is definitely too small at this point, and we don't have the parts to get larger. So that's understood. At this point, I think that the way to go is indeed to do radial decouplers here. I'm going to have them be a little smaller, and I'm going to have them be offset. I'm concerned about blowing them up with the exhaust from here. So those are going to want to be not X264 tanks. Well, actually, we don't have to worry about that if we've got this engine here. It's just going to be very low thrust to weight. But I would like to ditch this engine, ideally. So the way to do this would be these, not T400s, I want X232s. They would go about here. Like this. Do we actually have the space to put in X264s? Perhaps. So this would be entirely based around transporting the fuel, right? This stage is just about the fuel. So we would strut these together. I'm a little concerned still about our exhaust overheating these fuel tanks. We'll see how that ends up going. We'll just strut those together like this, and then I'm going to strut them on here and here, about like that. So that would be our interplanetary transfer stage, and that doesn't have its own engine for weight purposes. So that's absolutely fine. I'm interested in potentially moving these tanks up a little bit. So to about here. I'm still very concerned about the plume here. We should probably consider putting this thing up in space just to test this. Although, I'm not sure, does this game have a cheat menu that we can use for simulations, the way that KSP1 did? I don't know. We'll have to maybe experiment with that. But for the time being, this'll do. We may need to move these out a little bit further or something along those lines, but we've got some space here. I'm concerned about overheat, though. So for now, that's reasonably fine, right? And we're going to drain from these outer tanks first, ideally. And then we'll ditch those. So that would be, in theory, the fuel for the interplanetary transfer stage, right? And then we can work on our actual booster stage, which this is going to be insane. Although I do want to probably strut from here to here, about like that. And then maybe on the other side as well. So just make sure that's all nice and rigid. Something about like that should be reasonably fine. So this undocks here, and the idea would be that we would redock with this. To that end, we might want to have a probe control here. Although I don't think we have anything of an appropriate size. So I think that we're probably just going to stick with this for now and just leave this be. Hope that it's not tumbling when we come back to it. That could be spicy, but what else are we going to do? I mean, I suppose we could have, like, extremely small probe cores here, but antennas are going to be a thing. What if we included an external command seat? So we could have a Kerbal come over and ride this thing. That would be interesting. It doesn't have power, though, and it doesn't have any sort of... Well, we could definitely put in some solar panels here. So these would not need to be stowable solar panels, right? We should put stowable solar panels up here. I'm going to do probably quad stowable solar panels here. So something like... Actually, I'm thinking about having them be in this gap here to potentially be less occluded by these tanks. They're not going to not be occluded by the tanks, but less occluded. Then we can do something kind of like this to have solar panels here. Then I am leaning towards having some sort of a probe core on this. Well, maybe not even a probe core. So here's what I'm thinking right now. We put a medium reaction wheel here, like that. Then we detach this and put it there momentarily. We put in a light command control vessel here, like an explorer. Then we attach that like this. We're going to have to redo our strut work up over here, looks like. That is reasonably fine. This is not in symmetry mode. I would like it in symmetry mode. Thank you very much. Okay, something about like that. And then another strut right up over like that. Okay, so something along the lines of this. What this allows us to do is this allows us to have a Kerbal get in here, and then we can control it that way. This would need to be a pilot, though, wouldn't it? Are there different Kerbal types in KSP2? I need to think about that. Let's save this real quick. So we're going to save this as the Duna lander. Yes, and I want to head over to the... This is the training center? Yeah, this isn't what I want. What I want is to know if there are different types of Kerbals. I don't see anything like a Kerbanaut center or anything like that. Okay, let's head back into the VAB then and look at what we have in this. We can just bring a pilot Kerbal and have them live in here this whole time, in theory. So that's reasonably fine. Now, does this auto-populate? Kerbal Manager. Okay, so that seems fine. I am not immediately seeing any specializations. Okay, so that seems reasonably fine. We're going to be bringing our 3 Kerbals, and this is probably going to be Jeb, Bill, and Valentina. So even if they do have specializations, Jeb and Valentina, at least in KSP1, are pilots, and Bill is an engineer. Those are the ones I want to bring along. So that will be absolutely fine for right now. Now we need to figure out a way, assuming that these are not going to be cooked off by these engines, we need to figure out a way for this setup, and we could maybe move these to be inline here and be drop tanks here. That's actually very interesting. But that would cause further problems down the road. This would be a better setup if we don't have heat issues here. Okay, we need to figure out a way to lift this thing into Kerbin orbit. That's going to be exciting. No doubt about that. First things first, we're obviously going to need a decoupler right here. So decoupler goes in, and we're going to need to lift this thing somehow. So first things first, I'm going to have a pair of these guys, and then we're going to put in simply a mainsail. That is obviously not going to be enough to lift us, right? So let's hop in here and see what this looks like. Kerbin atmosphere, 486 meters per second, 0.38 delta V. Okay. That's not ideal. Not ideal at all. This needs to be a lot more powerful than this. So we're going to have to do strap-on boosters for sure. Do we want to do SRBs, or do we want to have these be liquid-fueled? Liquid-fueled would potentially be interesting here. So I'd put methylox tanks here and here, like this. Maybe even a 200 here. Is that clipping together? It's very close if it isn't. I think it is. So we wouldn't want to have that. We'd maybe want to have just the 16s here. So something about like that. Then we would stack on some mainsails here as our most powerful engine that we currently have available, right? And then these would all be grouped together. What just happened? Where did they go? Oh, they're all down here. Okay, never mind. I was apparently blind. So this is 1.13 thrust to weight. This is very low. This is not really good enough on the thrust to weight. It's 0.97 when we're on the pad. This would not even get off the ground in its current state. And we've got quite a lot more to do to it. So we definitely do want to strut together up here. We're going to have some aerodynamic issues, I bet. But we're hoping to just brute force through the atmosphere for that. Now, I want to strut this here, and I want to strut it on the bottom as well. So that'll come from here to about here. I would like to have a fuel line, if this worked like in KSP1. I would put a fuel line like this, just like that. Then, we need more power. We definitely need more power. We could make this be 8-coupled or 6-coupled instead of being quad-coupled. And I think that's not a terrible concept. This is Kerbal, after all. So we would just get more on here. We'd just strap more on, right? So this would end up going not there, but somewhere around here. These are extraordinarily tightly packed. I'm going to undo that. And we're going to need to instead have this be in 6x symmetry. They're too tightly packed to allow a clean detachment. Okay, so we're going to align this about... Yeah, I really don't like that connection. About here? I think that's reasonably fine. So we take a look at this, and I don't want that. We take a look at this stage, and we can see that this is 1.1 thrust to weight. So that's basically no change, right? This is functionally the same thing. Now, I do want to work on these struts, for sure. There's a lot of struts on here that need to be removed, and I want these struts to be done a fair amount differently. Okay, let's undo that. There are definitely a bunch of empty struts here at this point. Noted. So let's bring this down to 4x symmetry and connect these up. Yep, that all looks correct. This I want to connect down to here. And then this connects down here. I don't know where this strut is intended to go. I guess we can connect it, get rid of that. There's this strut here, which we can get rid of. This strut, which should be connected directly over. That is definitely not going the right direction. That should go... Ooh, hang on. This is going very wrong. Okay, we'll get rid of that. That is fine for right now. These struts should be connected in over here. I don't know why all of these struts broke, but okay. Now, you should be connected, in theory, over here. You're not connected to anything at all? I see what it's doing. Okay, that is definitely not what we want it to be doing. Okay, I don't want this here either. What are you? Get out of here. Okay, so we've got some strut issues here. No doubt about that. I'm going to get rid of all of these existing struts. That is going to have to be handled. And we will definitely do so. This strut is also broken. So we're going to get rid of that and get rid of this one and this one. We're going to have to redo all of those struts, which is, of course, obnoxious, but it's not the end of the world. Get rid of you and get rid of you. Okay, why did that reset our camera? But whatever. Okay. Get rid of you and get rid of you and get rid of you and get rid of you. Okay. Is that all of these struts? Well, there's one here. And one here. One here. There's a lot of these. Okay. We're getting rid of all of those. I just want to completely redo our struts from scratch. Here's one. And here's one. There should be one down here as well. Get rid of you. There we go. So obviously our thrust to weight is not high enough as of right now. This is a little too heavy. And I think ditching these tanks does make some sense for boosting that thrust to weight. But I'm not going to do that. What? What is happening right now? I'm very confused by what's happening. The game is frozen. Okay. I think I may have broken it. Oh, there we go. Now it's working correct. Oh, it moved everything way, way, way down. No, don't grab that. What's the root part here? Hang on. Oh, I see what's happening here. So we're clipped into it at this moment. Wild. Okay, so we need to grab the root part here. This is very strange, to be sure. Let's grab the rotate and translate tool. Align to assembly or world doesn't really matter. I'm not sure why this decided to clip itself into the ground, but I would very much like to be able to move it. This is apparently not the root part. Something just horribly broke. So I guess we should reload it. That's this thing here. It definitely horribly broke. Okay. So all those struts are still there. That's a little obnoxious. But I guess for now, what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to get this thrust to weight set up. So I want to put in an additional outer ring here of SRBs. So those are going to go out here. We need additional power to lift this thing, right? So the best we can do is these kickbacks. So that's 6 kickbacks there. They are at a thrust to weight of 0.39, but we would combine them together with all of these to put us at 1.49. That is not the world's finest thrust to weight, but it's probably good enough. So we just move these down a little bit, something along the lines of, I want to grab this guy out here. Yeah, you'll do. Something about like this, although maybe not quite that low. Yeah, about there. Okay, now we're going to need to get this all strutted together and get the stages done correctly, right? And that, of course, is going to be exciting, especially considering I don't fully understand how the fuel line system in this game works. So there is that. Are you a fuel line? I think you are. Okay, let's get rid of you. I'm going to save this in its current state. Yes, save that. Before we break it again. And then we're going to have to get all of this strut work done, right? So that is going to be a lot. Don't do that, please. There we go. We're going to grab this strut and get rid of that. And all of these struts in general, we're going to need to get rid of. So the overall plan for this thing is we need to get it into orbit, and there are some open questions about it, such as, are we going to have issues with burning off these tanks as we burn these engines? I don't want to carry additional engines if we can help it. And I suspect we can help it. So that is going to be a pretty major question. But I want to get rid of all these struts for now. We're going to have to re-strut this all together. Undo that. Hope we don't break it. I'm going to save it just to be on the safe side. Okay. So we're going to grab all of these. There we go. So all of these struts need to eventually get removed, and we're going to have to redo all of them because those broke on us. That's fine, but we are definitely going to have to do it. And fuel lines are going to have to be set up correctly. We'll have to figure out exactly how that system works with the fuel lines. It'll be interesting. It seems to just pull evenly right now, which is definitely not the expected behavior coming from KSP1. Okay, so I think that's our struts under control at this point. I'm reasonably certain, anyway. There's still this strut here, which I accidentally missed. We'll undo that and get this strut out of here. There's a strut over here as well. Okay. Here's one. But other than that, we're pretty much ready to strut this thing together and at least put it out in space and see. So the SRBs are going to get us going. We should definitely put a nose cone on the SRBs. Something like that. So the SRBs get us going for that first minute there, and that thrust to weight is going to go up a lot as we burn out a lot of that fuel. The idea is we will burn these outer fuel tanks first, and then the inner tank, and then detach all of that. Well, we detach these first, but I don't know how this is supposed to work in KSP2. I'll have to experiment with that. That'll be interesting. We'll need to strut this together, and we'll need to get the fuel tanks all properly set up. But it is time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we're going to finalize this design a bit. It's kind of crazy, no doubt about it. We're going to finalize this design a bit, and we'll see how it performs. There will almost certainly need to be changes. Also, I believe, did we include a heat shield here? Yes, we did. Okay. Just wanted to double check that. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Atala, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.